Hello, physical science class. As we've been discussing in class, we're going to do some slope problems right here. Okay. If you guys may remember, slope is designated by the letter M. And the reason why we're using it, because we need it for our line graphs. When dealing with the scientific method, it's good to know at the rate of change that's happening between the variables of your independent variable and your dependent variable. If you may remember that slope for us is going to be your dependent variable over your independent variable. And the reason why that works out is because your dependent variable is on the y-axis while your independent variable is on the x-axis. And if that looks familiar, it's because that's what the slope equation is. The slope equation is m equals y sub 2 minus y sub, let's put that in parentheses first, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now, if we're trying to figure out what these variables mean, each of these variables, y2 and y sub 1, refers to two options for y. So if we have y, that means we have two options. There's two possible numbers we could use for y. And if you're asking where that's coming from, come over here to the sample problems. Look at the very first sample problem, number 1. First sample problem number 1 asks us to determine the slope between past the points -1, 0 and 3, -8. And if you remember what that meant, the coordinates of -1, 0 and 3, 8. Well, these are, if you remember the coordinates, the x goes first in the first coordinate and the y goes next. And then again, the x and the y. And since, like as we said, there's two options. If I have two x's and have two y's, I need to designate which one is which. So for our sake, I'm going to call this x sub 1, and I'm going to call this y sub 1. I'm going to call this one x sub 2, and this one y sub 2. So that way, whenever we go to manipulate the variables, we know which one we're talking about. So using this information, let's see if we can help us implement into this equation for slope. So if we remember the g.u.e.s.s method over here, the g.u.e.s.s system of solving equations, we're going to go try through each one of them. So what we're trying to find is slope. Our very first thing, using this problem that's right here, the very first one in problem number 1, is to find the slope of that line. In order to do so, we need to write down the variables that we are given. And as you can see, we are given in the total equation of m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. We plan to just substitute those variables in. And so here we go. Let's write down the given variables. Our x sub 1 is going to equal -1. Our y sub 1 is going to equal 0. Our x sub 2 is going to equal 3. And our y sub 2 is going to equal 8. So we've got our given variables taken care of. Check. Next, what we need to do is we need to write down our unknown variable. And for our sake, that's going to be m, and it's going to put in a question mark. So our unknown variable is taken care of. Check. Next thing we need to do is write down the equation. I have it written down over here, and just for the sake of memorization and repetition, I'm going to write it down again. So our equation is m equals parentheses y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Now, what this is saying is this y sub 2 over y sub 1 and the x sub 2 over x minus x sub 1, what this is saying, do you notice how the y sub 2 region and the x sub 2 region occupy the same space? Or are the first to be, are the ones in front? That's not an accident. What this is referring to is both of these. So the x sub 2, the coordinate that makes up the 3 and the 8, these are going to go first. You can't mix and match them. So we're going to put the 8 first, so that's the, there's our equation, and the check. Now we need to do the substitute part. Are we changing m? We are not, so we're going to leave that there. M equals, did we change our parentheses? No, we're going to leave that there. So we're going to leave both of the parentheses there. Did we change our fraction bar? No. And so parentheses here haven't changed either. So what we need to do is we need to find our y sub 2 and plug it in. That's the substitution part here for this s. So y sub 2 we said was 8. So 8. And again, we didn't change our subtraction sign, so we bring that back. And then the y sub 1 is 0. X sub 2 now is, as we can see, is the 3. So we're going to bring that here. And we did change the subtraction sign. And we're going to go to the x sub 1, which is negative 1. We'll put that in parentheses so that people are aware that that's just a sign, and that's going to play a role. So then we do our order of operations. This is a PEMDAS problem. So if we look, we have, please excuse my dear, Sally, we have parentheses, no exponents, division, and addition. So we're going to take care of the business that's in parentheses. So here's parentheses when the parentheses, a negative times a negative is a positive. So we're going to have to rewrite that, or we'll take care of that in one step. So 8 minus 0 is going to give me 8. So I'm going to rewrite that as it equals 8. I haven't changed my fraction bars. I'm going to leave that there. And 3 minus a negative 1 is really 3 plus 1, and that's going to be 4. Are we done yet? No, we're going to reduce it down to 2 over 1. There we go. There is the reduced form. So our slope is going to be 2 over 1. So the slope that runs through the points negative 1 and 0 and 3 and 8 is going to be 2 over 1. If we may remember that 2 over 1 is rise over run, and for our sake here, let's remember that the rise is the dependent variable and the run is the independent variable. And if we forget, let's look at a little graph. So m equals rise over run. And if we look at our graph example, this is my independent variable, this is my dependent variable. So dependent and independent. And that makes sense with our rise. And then our run is over here with the x-axis, so the y and the x, if we remember that. So let's go ahead and do the next problem, and we can kind of go through this a little bit faster. So let's go ahead and erase all of our work from the previous problem and start all over. Yes. Okay, so let's write down what our new problem is. Our new problem asks us says find the slope of a line that passes through the points 2, 0 and 2, 4. So that's our problem, find the slope. So first things first, we write down our givens. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so the two coordinates we're dealing with is 2, 0 and 2, 4. So 2, 0 and 2, 4. Let's go ahead and label them what they are. It doesn't matter which one is first, which one is second. We can flip-flop them as we've shown you in class. So for our sake, we're going to go ahead and just go ahead and flip-flop them for different sake. So what this is going to be my second one. So this right here is an x. So this is going to be my x sub 2, which makes this one my y sub 2, which makes this my x sub 1 and my y sub 1. We have our variables listed. Here they are. Check. Our given variables are done. Check. The next, we're trying to find slopes, and that's m equals, we don't know it, so question mark, check. And then we're going to write down our equation. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1, in parentheses, over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, in parentheses. Now we need to solve this, because we've taken care of that. So let's go ahead and substitute this first. M equals, what is our y sub 2? Our y sub 2 was 0, parentheses, minus, our y sub 1 is 4. 4. Next is our fraction bar, because that hasn't changed. And it's going to be 2 minus 2, because our x sub 2 is 2, and our x sub 1 over here is 2, and our x sub 1 here is 2 also. So we solve for this, and it's going to be negative 4 over 0. Now, of course, what that means is that when we put this into a rise over run, it's going to rise negative 4 for every run of 0. Well, that just means that all that means right there is that we're not really going to have a graph that's just going to, the running, it can keep going up, but it's not going to keep going over, because it doesn't increase ever. So it doesn't ever increase this way. So any questions over that? I hope that we've cleared up some misconceptions, or at least done some math problems to help. Thank you.